Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's webinar. This is the fourth in our Challenge and Opportunity webcast series for PPM. The fourth in this series, the topic will be on improving PPM maturity. Just as a little bit of a recap, we actually had a four-part series here where we started with prioritizing demand, project communications and reporting followed, and then last week we did providing value at all levels. All of these are available on our website at epmlive.com. You can go under our events section and select webinars, and the ones that have already taken place, there are recordings available there. Also, any of the slide decks that we used in here, if you want to get copies of those, please just send us an inquiry to either sales or info@epmlive.com to request that, and we're happy to provide you with the information that you're looking for. In the first challenge in prioritizing demand, we covered topics on things like demand management, portfolio management, resource management, financial management, and what-if modeling so that we could actually get a good handle and make objective assessments and selections and optimizations on the demand coming into us for project and other work. On the project communication and reporting, we talked about project communication tools in our solution and in others to help keep team members communicating with each other, communicating up the chain of command, and other types of things to keep the ball rolling without cumbersome communication methods. Also did some things on reporting, change process management, just resource reporting that keeps everybody in the loop within the project process. That was the focus of our second webinar. And then last week in providing value at all levels, we really talked about how PPM, the process and the solutions really need to meet the needs of a wide audience. How the enterprise needs for a solution and a process versus the individual user or stakeholder needs. And we really discussed the value that these solutions and processes provide at the different levels, whether they be senior management, middle management, which could be your project and your resource managers, for example, and the team members on the projects. We really talked about the importance of including as much work in the solution as you can so that you can get a better visibility into things like resource demand. And then just project roles and tools, and we talked about applicable tools in our solution that actually provide this communication and value to folks at the different levels. And the flexibility of providing, providing for all types of methodologies and work types within the organization. And you can see that in much more detail if you look at the recording. So with that, let's get into today's topic. Let's start talking about improving our PPM maturity. And the basic challenge here is, how do we provide for growth and improvement of PPM maturity within our organization, and not just in a subset of the organization, but across the board. The other challenge is, how do we really put a plan in place to execute on this? How do we improve organizational maturity? It's not going to happen by itself. It's not going to happen bubbling up. It's going to take some purpose and some planning to make that happen. And also, really benchmarking effectiveness. How do we know we're improving unless we know where we're starting from? And what incremental improvements we're making along the way so that we can show the improvement based on the effort that we put forth to kind of undertake this increased PPM maturity. So those are some of the challenges we're going to discuss today and approaches and topics related to this. So the opportunities to meet those challenges are, we can establish or improve an organization's PPM processes along the way, of which there are many related processes, and these could, some of them could be things like better resource utilization, portfolio optimization, and better cost control within your project portfolio management system. The other opportunity is to increasingly and purposefully move up the scale in the PPM maturity model. We'll talk about what a maturity model is today as part of that. And then actually have a more effective project management in general, whether it be a PMO or some other mechanisms that you're using internally. But the idea is, the correlation here is that the higher you get in achievement of a PPM maturity level within your organization, that should, in a positive correlation, result into a higher success ratio for your projects. So let's talk about PPM maturity models themselves. There's a variety of them. There's a few dozen of them out there that I've seen. Some of the more common ones are things like the Software Engineering Institute, SEI's CMM, or Capability Maturity Model, the Project Management Institute, the project management body of knowledge has one that outlines a nice roadmap. Gartner, the Gartner group, IT analysts have a model, and there's a variety of offshoots of these things, but all with a common kind of thread and theme and approach. And we're going to focus today on the concept of a particular model that oftentimes people actually take bits and pieces from different models and actually apply the ones that are most fitting to their organization. But the concepts generally remain the same. The Gartner group, for example, has a 5-level model, and a 4 or 5-level model seems to be common within the marketplace and in the project management discipline. And it really is a progression, you know, from where we're really starting out, where we're much more ad hoc or reactive, all the way to where we are in kind of a sustaining continual improvement mode, where we're really humming along and we're doing things in a very, very mature fashion. If you can see in the upper left of this slide, just from an IT perspective, Gartner estimates, and through its research, that the majority of people are at level 2 and possibly level 3 of this maturity model. And you know, that effectiveness and getting beyond that level 3 takes effort, it takes purpose, it takes some sweat in order to get to that level and reach the level that you want to get from a project success perspective. And as you go on through this and you get through increasing levels of maturity, our effectiveness in delivering projects and having project failures, it becomes less and less common within an organization that has repeatable and integrated processes. You know, the common things we talk about in project management maturity, there's a bunch of different dimensions to this. You know, the more common ones that are talked about are people, process, and tools. If you go through the lower maturity levels of these things, like on a people level, for example, they may have no project management background. Maybe the organization has a lot of accidental project managers who are good technical people or good engineering people, and they've been put in the role of project manager without any really formal project management training. The next level up from that may be that there's some basic project management training, at least some understanding of that, and all the way up to the next level where you have good project management certification, like a PMP certification from the Project Management Institute. From a process perspective, at the lowest levels, you know, the processes tend to be more ad hoc, nothing formalized, no real defined processes, and projects tend to get managed through and succeed through pure brute force or heroism by certain project managers. But as you move up that scale, your project management processes can be standardized, repeated, enforced or promoted so that we do things in a common way from project to project, so that we have you know, apples to apples each time. We can improve on that process as we go on through. And then the next step on that in a more mature process would be this process could be automated electronically with workflows. We don't have to knock on doors or send emails. And good portfolio reporting, for example, could be a natural output of the process without them having to be projects in and of themselves to develop those reports. And just from a technology and tools perspective, you know, on a low level of maturity, people can use a variety of tools, and there may not be any standards established. People may be using paper or Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, or just managing through email, for example, and it could be all of those on the same project, meaning that there's no real one central place for project information or knowledge. But in kind of a mid-range or repeatable process, we start developing templates. We start using common tools. We start building schedules. We start collaborating in a common forum. And that helps us improve in our project management maturity as well. And as you move on up, a dedicated EPM, Enterprise Project Management, or PPM, Project Portfolio Management tool, that it really ends up being the hub for all this project information and communication and process automation, is a way to centralize this thing, make sure everything's in a common form and format. So by these, no means is this exhaustive, but it's meant to be an example of what we mean by progressions as we go through these different areas of people, process, and tools. So let's talk about understanding the concept of maturity. Essentially, when we look at that, we're looking at maturity from essentially 5 core dimensions. We talk about the people, we talk about the PPM practices and processes, we talk about the technology. We also talk about financial management, because there's always a financial component from a success perspective on the costs of a project and what it's really taking for us to actually deliver on this project, and also financial management even from a benefits perspective on the things and the cost savings that we're getting. Also the relationships, these different stakeholders, the different entities, the different people in a project or set of projects have to communicate and relate to one another in order for us to successfully deliver on projects. And the degree to which we do that increases and improves with different levels of project management maturity. So from the people perspective, people are really the most critical part of any project. We're the ones that do the work. We're the ones that provide the deliverables. We're the ones that provide the knowledge and the unique skill sets. And having the right people at the right time is the most critical part of any project success. From a people perspective, there's a lot of interdependency between a lot of project team members. For example, their availability, the skill sets they bring to the table, and the work contributions that they're making are critical to the project success. And the way we actually organize and coordinate that gets better or improves as we mature in our PPM skills and processes. At the higher levels of maturity, as we have repeatable processes and we're following things where it's not as personality dependent as it is in lower level of maturity, leadership ability in coordinating and supporting all these PPM activities becomes critical to make sure that things keep humming along and that the things are working for people as intended. From a PPM practices and processes perspective, the PPM processes at a high level include portfolio management, which we talked about in our earlier session, program management, really managing a large effort, maybe of a collection of projects that are delivering a bigger or larger common goal or deliverable, and then just the individual project management, the things that we're going to do in managing schedules and risks and resources and things like that. Now, in a PPM process, these high-level processes all really have a myriad of sub-processes. For example, even in project management, there's risk management process, there's change management process, there's schedule management process, there's resource management process, there's all the different sub-dimensions and sub-processes. When you look at maturing in PPM, it's not just these high-level bullets that we're looking at. And each one of these processes, as we tackle them and we try to improve them and enhance them within our organization, there's an element of change. We're trying to get the culture and the organization to change with us to adopt those processes. So it's not so simple as just putting in a process or documenting a process and disseminating it. It's really managing the change and promoting that change throughout the organization. A common practice to help coordinate this and provide a central center of excellence for this is really establishment of a PMO. Different organizations call them project management office. There's incantations of maybe more of a program management office or maybe a more portfolio focus and portfolio reporting focus. But the idea, a PMO can provide a central driving force and an impetus behind putting PPM practices and processes in place and help evolve them over time. From a technology perspective or dimension, the requirements for technology really evolve with the PPM process changes that are put in place. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate technology to enable the processes we put in place. Process in and of itself doesn't necessarily have to have a technology component, but the more we can automate and streamline those processes, the more effective and user-friendly they will be. So the key there is that they'll evolve with the process changes that we put in place. And they'll also change with increasing levels of maturity. As our needs and our abilities and our maturity gets higher, our expectations and our needs are going to become greater. So the use of more sophisticated tools or feature sets and tools is going to become paramount for us to succeed at going up the chain and getting better over time. Your PPM processes often require unique tool sets or features to fulfill the business functions, whether they be a financial aspect, whether they be a collaborative communication aspect, whether it be project-related accounting or management of project-related funding, resource management, any of the other sub-processes that are in your process. You could have unique feature sets or even unique tools that are needed in order to facilitate and manage that collectively. Because any one dimension of those in a project management process is not sufficient. Just looking at how we're spending money or the cost side of things is great to see are we going according to budget. But if we don't look at that in terms of also progress that we're making and what that money has actually gotten us as far as completion of things, it's only one dimension of that we're looking at and not giving us an entire picture of the project. So the idea of these different interrelated business functions should be tackled and addressed in order to successfully execute on our PPM process. From a financial management perspective, like I was saying, financial management systems make all that people are using before level 1 or even level 0 before they start doing anything. And if you have lump sums and you're just tracking whether or not we're over or under budget, that might be sufficient in a lower level of maturity. But when you start getting more sophisticated, and you start managing multiple projects and programs, and you start trying to manage the deliverables and the effectiveness and the resource aspects of things, just looking at the financials or a financial system is not sufficient in and of itself to make these things happen. So from a financial management perspective, it may not just be your financial system. It may be other systems interrelating or providing data that is subsequent or supplementing that financial data to help us. So we can do things like look at chargebacks or invoicing. We can allocate costs. We can track value in progress as far as how we're deriving value in progress in our project for the money that we're spending. From a relationships perspective, organizations, as they embark upon an improvement in their PPM processes, should identify the touch points needed to maintain the PPM process. So the idea, once we establish it and define it, it's not just sufficient to document it. We need to understand who needs to be informed, who needs to be consulted, whose help is mandatory for the process to work effectively. You know, who are the touch points and the things that are going to be actuated by certain individuals within this PPM process. So if we go start looking at this from a diagram perspective, and we start looking at different levels, and this one depicts from level 0 on up to a level 5, with the different dimensions down the left of people, PPM process, technology, financial management, relationships, we can start defining some characteristics for each of these levels. Now, these are guideposts. These are things that are good measuring sticks and barometers for us. The key is that we need to adopt the ones of these that make the most sense for us and the ones that we feel that are achievable, especially early on. So where level 0 is here defined as totally non-existent PPM maturity, and it's totally ad hoc in its nature. Level 1 is called reactive. Level 2, in a more developing, is called emerging discipline. Level 3, in a more defined state or level of maturity, is called initial integration. The managed or level 4 level is called increasing efficiency. And then the level 5 optimizing is really about enterprise orientation and beyond of a PPM maturity and a PPM process. And we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. I will say this, I'm definitely not going to read you down to sub-bullet level detail and discuss in here, but these slides are going to be available for you for reference points. And I think that there's some good examples in here that I'll go past here and introduce to you, but I definitely won't bore you with the gory details. For example, as we look at the 5 dimensions in a level 1 reactive level of maturity, you know, the ways you want to define things, and you know, you can take to heart, for example, the things that you know apply to you in these areas. And one of the keys here is we should be honest and objective with ourselves when we're assessing where we're really at from a project management maturity perspective. So on a people perspective on level 1, you know, the priority projects get appropriate staffing, but everything else gets staff first available, a little bit more loosey-goosey. There may not be, or they may be just an emerging PPM leader role, so that there's still an individual project manager focus. So we're really focused on the individual project manager, not looking at from a holistic, maybe portfolio of projects as we're looking to go through PPM. A few people begin to work towards stopping the pain and getting organized, but it might be a more informal effort where we don't have a PMO yet in place and things like that. From a PPM practices and processes perspective, all internal processes are centered on the management of critical projects, meaning the non-critical or maybe the smaller projects maybe don't fall under the umbrella, and we start managing those in a less mature way. The approach to processes centered on the necessity and observation of processes brought in by outside vendors working on large projects and programs, meaning we really haven't internalized that. You know, we're picking and choosing from outside, and we're bringing external expertise in-house to help us do these things because we're just getting started. You know, from a technology perspective, the project scheduling tools and milestone reporting tools are adopted on a project-by-project basis, meaning whoever the project manager is going to choose their own tool sets and their own methods, and there's no real standardization or consistency there. From a financial management perspective, projects may have budgetary estimates and actual costs maybe are not being tracked at a detailed level. So there's certain aspects of that aren't real formalized or evolved yet. And on the relationship side, informal relationships break down and communication gaps occur when you're at a lower level of maturity in your process. And it spawns the need or the necessity to formalize roles, including that of stakeholders, so that we can actually get more consistent communication and things do not fall through the gaps. So with this type of process, you can start looking at some characteristics as we go through level 2, and you can start looking at what these mean in these 5 dimensions from a concept of projects, from programs, and from portfolio management. And I think rather than spend the time here to discuss this with you today on a detailed level, just let you know these resources are going to be made available to you for your review. So as we go through level 2 on all 5 dimensions, level 3, obviously there's different levels and an escalation of capabilities and sophistication in these processes and these different dimensions as we go on through, from level 4 and then up to level 5. I think our time is probably better spent letting you know that this information is here for you, but the concept here is that we get from more ad hoc to more defined and standardized to more repeatable in things that we're doing and consistent, to then really getting to where we are fully integrated in our process in all aspects of it, and then in the highest level of maturity, that level 5, which very few companies get to, by the way. Level 5 is kind of a level that optimization and that constant just enhancing and optimizing of your process is something that's often strived for, but it's rarely achieved. There are companies that have done it, but it is not common for most companies to get there. So as you go on through here and we start looking at this maturity and its dimensions, set your goals of where you want to be and set yourself up to get to that next level on an incremental basis. So let's talk about critical steps to improving the maturity. So let's just say we all acknowledge that the model is there and that what it espouses is valid, and there's some attractive aspects to it that we want to get involved in. So what if we want to embark upon this for our particular organization? Well, the first thing you want to do is probably decide what type of approach you want to take. Do you want to take more of a top-down approach or a bottoms-up approach? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, from a top-down approach, if you look at this big picture, as we like to call it, from the top down, the intake of demand management and project requests and project prioritization and scoring projects and doing capacity planning and what-if analysis, that's really that upfront intake process and optimization of your portfolio and really selection of the work, capturing the ideas and the requests and doing intelligent, objective selection of what things we should be working on. From the top down, some folks want to tackle that first in their PPM process, meaning maybe the pain point is that we never say no to anything. By the pure deluge of work that comes in, because we don't really have an effective funnel for prioritizing and selecting work, everything's overloaded, resources are overtaxed, and consequently the management and execution that happens down below is impacted because there's just too much workload. So some folks are saying maybe my real pain point and my real priority should be getting a handle on the intake and the funnel to make sure that we're working on things that we can reasonably expect to deliver on. Now, other folks may want to take a bottoms-up approach. That bottoms-up approach could be, let's really refine our execution of our project management. Let's get better at schedule and resource management and execution and collaboration and issue and risk management and change process, really the tactical part things that we want to work on and execute in these projects. If we refine those processes, we can eliminate inefficiencies, we can eliminate waste and duplication of effort and manual processes so that we can get more streamlined it down there in this execution side of things and take more of a bottoms-up approach, and then possibly later on work on the intake from the top down. I would say this, most folks that tackle on process change and system deployments to support this don't tackle all nodes on this or all aspects of this in one big chunk. They take more of a roadmap or a phased approach to doing these. There's no one right way. Your entry into this could be from the top down, could be from the bottom up, and to be quite frank, it could be from the side, as people want to do things better on the reporting and analytics side of things and just need databases so that they can get more streamlined access to information. But the key is depending on where you start is probably the first choice you need to make. Do you want to tackle this from the top down or more from the bottom up? So now, how do we apply this to your organization? Well, first thing you have to do is really do an objective, honest, soul-searching assessment of the maturity of your current PPM practices within your organization. Really level with yourselves on where you're at. There's all kinds of tools and techniques and questionnaires that we use in our consulting, for example, to determine in all the different process and knowledge areas within project management, how mature are we in each of those areas, and come up with an overall score and scores within those sub-processes of where our strengths and weaknesses are. Now, after we assess where we're at, we need to determine the maturity level required to meet future needs. Where do we need to get to be effective at what we want to do? And we may find that there's, a gap that needs to be filled between where we're at today and where we're there. But to do that, we need to then tailor a strategy that first focuses on the areas that need the most improvement and will give us the best return and improvement within the organization. And then in that plan, we should consider the strengths and weaknesses in the roadmap and the development plan, meaning what are our strengths as an organization? What are the things that, we don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater? What are the things that we do well that we want to leverage and keep? What are our weaknesses or the things that are not working well for us that we need to improve and enhance to complement our strengths? And those should be factored into the roadmap and development plan. And I would say your strengths and weaknesses, particularly the weaknesses, should temper your plan so it's not too aggressive, that it doesn't tackle too much change at one time, so that it's something that you have a reasonable chance of succeeding with and getting the organization to adopt and go along with. So we really, as we go through this, we want to define what our current state is. We want to kind of determine what a target state is and agree on what that target state or future state might look like. We then want to identify gaps in where we are between those two and then really build a thoughtful, well-tempered plan for improvement that will get us from point A to point Z. So as we evolve to our level of maturity and we start planning for this, we really want to plan to do incremental phases. We want to do an implementation of these process and system changes in a phased approach. It's helpful because how do we know if we succeed if we don't know how we're improving? We really want to focus, and some people really forget to do this aspect of it, is benchmark the targeted areas of improvements and measure. If there's an area that you want to improve on, so for example like information communication and reporting, if we're spending an inordinate amount of manual time compiling reports and we know what's costing us in people time and effort now, let's benchmark what it takes today and let's set goals for what a system was going to do to save that improvement, and let's measure where we started, and then after we put the process improvements in place, let's measure what we've got and the value of the time savings, for example, in that case that we're having. That's just one example. And then we should measure values in each of these process improvements as they apply to the different levels of stakeholders within the organization and in the PPM process. The key stakeholders that you often have to address is the project managers, the department managers who own the resources, the executives who need reporting, support organizations, and the team members who are working on the project. What benefits and values were being provided to them by the process and system changes that we put in place. So this by no means is prescriptive, but just an example of what sample phases might look like for somebody that wants to embark upon a project and portfolio management improvement plan for their maturity level. Phase one might be just implement very basic project management, including initiating projects, planning them well, allocating resources in a thoughtful way, putting the controls in place so that project managers can have better control over the execution and the expenditures of the project and how it executes, and have a formal closure process so we know that projects are closed and properly handed off at the appropriate time. Those are some just basic individual project management things that could be put in place. Not very broad, but if they're repeatable and we do them well, they could apply to improvements across all of our projects. So phase two might be, let's add another level of sophistication or capability within that mix. let's add risk management to the basic project management functionality and start tracking risks so that we can actually identify them, monitor them, and really pre-think out some mitigation plans and not get caught flat-footed when some of the threats to the project may take place. We might have some basic program management where we take collections of projects and start managing them as entities. So stepping up from individual project management to really more complex program management, the interdependencies and things like that embodied in those. Just portfolio management processes and capabilities. Start really looking at our projects as a collection, as a portfolio, and possibly even doing some portfolio management techniques to manage both the intake and the execution of those projects. Phase 3 might be starting to get more sophisticated and start really doing more cost management. There's a lot of folks that are doing project management from a deliverables, a task, and a resource perspective, and really not doing a detailed job of cost management. So maybe adding cost management, getting tied in with our procurement and our financial systems so that we get visibility and management over those things are something that could be added to the mix at a phase 3 in this example. And then in phase 4, services portfolio planning, maybe getting a broader work mix in there, not just our capital projects, for example, in our portfolio, but getting some of our lower level service work and other things that are going on, and getting some other pieces in there might be a related phase. So this is really meant not to be prescriptive, but really an idea of what we mean by doing this in phases and getting more and more sophisticated as we go through this. From a success factor perspective, I think what we want to have is a few things. One is we definitely want to have some thought leadership within the organization, someone who's driving the vision. So we want to create a roadmap and a vision for the implementation of the process and organizational changes and the PPM software that we determined to put in place. And we also want to create a good vision or explanation of why we're doing this. Who will it benefit? You know, the desired return on investment. And who's going to mount the charge and really sell this to the organization, constantly communicating the roadmap and the benefits and the progress to all levels of the organization so everybody feels that, you know, there's something in it for them, kind of like we talked about in the last session about value at all levels last week. Also, a success factor is clearly define the requirements and create an actionable scope. What I mean by that is let's not get too ambitious, but let's not be too timid. You know, scope should be manageable and doable. Probably in a phase, it should be achievable within a very finite period of time. Using here a typical like 90-day phase that we might put in place. And we want to keep to the mission of that phase and the goals of that phase, because if we get scope creep, when we get too scattered, we would derail our efforts as we lose sight of the payoff and really get a little too broad and scattered and spread too thin in what we're trying to accomplish. And if we remain laser beam focused on the scope that we're trying to achieve, we'll definitely be more effective at making an incremental success. And if we have these 60, 90, 120-day chunks of success, those frequent successes, instead of waiting for this big payoff at the very end of the process here, incremental frequent successes on a more frequent basis will fuel positive PR for all internal audiences, meaning your sponsorship, your support at all levels will maintain and hopefully build momentum. So the idea is like having a set of incremental successes, in my estimation, is always more advantageous than waiting for a big bang and saying, here, just wait, there's going to be improvement, but you have to wait 2 years for this. I'd rather have a series of incremental successes with small manageable scope than one big overly ambitious failure. The other thing we need to do is not just build a plan, but we got to choose to staff the effort properly. And these roles or teams, not necessarily have to be teams, but these roles in the process improvement effort and the system improvement effort should include these. You should have an implementation team, and that implementation team should define and implement the processes and put the supporting standards and material and software into place. They'll carry out each phase, so as we go and execute, they'll execute on the phase. And then once they put the things in place, like put the process in place, install the software, configure the software, etc., they would then hand it off to some people or group who we define here as a stabilization team, who would then carry it on to the next phase. And the difference being is that we want the implementation team to start working on and planning on the next phase and executing and not get sidetracked by supporting necessarily what they've already put in place. So the stabilization team at that point would take over from the implementation team and ensure that any processes, people, or technology issues that arise from the newly deployed phase are addressed, and so that there's no impact on the implementation team as they go to undertake the next phase. That's one way to keep the ball rolling. Don't let the people who are deploying or implementing get sidetracked by supporting issues of the process as they move on to the next phase, because you can get sidetracked very, very easily. And then an onboarding team would then be responsible with making sure on a deployment perspective that all the end users are trained in the new processes and standards and any new supporting materials and software that's going to be used. So this is done as a separate exercise so this doesn't divert the implementation resources away from the next phase. And this onboarding ensures that these process improvements will be used throughout the organization. We're equipping the organization and teeing them up for success. And if we get broad adoption of these things, the goal or the net result is that we will reach that next level of project management or PPM maturity. So we really want this to be incremental, and as one phase builds on the next, this helps ensure that the maturity level is consistently being raised across over time within the organization. So if you look at this from a tools perspective, we being a software vendor at EPM Live, one of the things we found, it's not a one-size-fits-all world there, and trying to fit people to ill-fitting tools is like wearing a ill-fitting suit. And so depending on the different levels of maturity that you're at within an organization, the tool sets that you should deploy or that you should promote or expect your organizations to use differ in their capabilities and levels of sophistication. At the lower levels of maturity, sometimes a more collaborative project management approach, not so much technical on the cost and resource side of things necessarily. From an EPM or enterprise project management where we're executing across portfolios of projects but mostly focused on the execution of multiple projects and applying resources, there's a whole set of features and functions in there. And then as we get more mature, really doing effective project portfolio management where we're really assessing and doing detailed business cases and justifying projects, scoring them appropriately and aligning them with our organization's strategic objectives, and those types of things long before we execute, then we start getting into a full end-to-end process that's very, very mature. We don't want to overshoot too far. So if we put a system deployment or a PPM tool deployment in the context of maturity levels, if we are really, say, at a level 2 as an organization, we've gone through that honest assessment of ourselves and we determined that we're really a level 2. If we're there and we want to improve and we want to get to 2.5 and then to 3, we don't want to put an expectation of a PPM process or system in place that really is going to demand level 4 rigor in order to make that happen. One is we could get the system up, we could get it configured, and it could all work technically, but if we overshoot it, it's probably not going to be sustainable from an organization that's really only at a level 2. So the key there is if we overshoot too far from where we're at in our maturity and the capabilities of the tools that we're putting in place, the risk of failure is really the gap between where we're at and where we're shooting for. So the idea is we want to stretch the organization incrementally. We don't want to break it or set it up for failure. To that end, just want to talk about the offerings that we have at EPM Live. In our continuum, in our technology, we have different levels of tool sets, from that collaborative project management to that enterprise project management execution to more sophisticated portfolio management, all building on itself. It's all starting with the same core technology, our SharePoint-based EPM Live solutions. Our project engine is a totally web-based collaboration software that allows us to do schedule management and team collaboration very simply in an online environment where you can spin up projects with templates and get going. You don't have to have very much level of maturity in order to actually start up this and execute with it from day one. As you start getting up into more portfolios and multiple projects and programs, and you want to get project visibility and manage your resources across a myriad of projects, our Work Engine product really takes that to the next level. It takes all the capabilities that are in Project Engine and adds a more global more all work focus, multiple project and programs within the visibility and the roll-ups that are in there, and really just steps it up to that next level of maturity if you put this in context of a maturity curve. And then Portfolio Engine takes everything that Work Engine has and then adds to that all the sophisticated demand management, portfolio management, financial management, capacity planning, what-if scenarios, etc., and taking that on the way up. What's nice about this is that you can actually grow and upgrade within our tool set to each of these different tiers because it's the same core technology that's driving this. So there's, for example, folks that are at lower level maturities and out there looking for lightweight tools, there's a lot of lightweight project management tools out there. The problem is that they have very limited capability, which means they have no headroom for growth. With our project engine, for example, you can get the lightweight things that you need today that are sustainable by your organization with the full realization that when you cross the line from a maturity perspective and you grow, Work Engine would be waiting there for you to update from Project Engine so you could do this all seamlessly within our continuum of products. So the key is that you could start here in the Project Engine realm, but you're not limited. You can take that all the way up to the Portfolio Engine level of sophistication at some point in time. So the key here is that we have products that really address the needs of the various levels of PPM maturity that we were discussing in concept as part of this webinar. If you'd like to check out any of these tool sets, depending on where you think you're at in that continuum, you can go to our website at epmlive.com and you can either learn more about the tool sets, look at videos, etc., or you can sign up for a free trial where you can actually get hands-on with this and go into a demo environment where you can actually work and feel with our tool sets. We're really not focusing so much on the demonstration of that today since the PPM maturity thing is much more of a conceptual thing. But if you actually go into our website at epmlive.com, you can actually go into these areas and you can actually either learn more or sign up for free trials. Also, as I mentioned earlier on, if you go into our events section in our website, we have our webinars in here, and underneath there you have registration for upcoming webinars as well as access to the recordings of webinars we've already done. This webinar will be recorded and should be available probably by the end of the day today. So with that, I thought I'd just wrap up a little bit here and just say project management maturity is something that we can all strive for. It's something that is a worthwhile endeavor because it really does make us more effective at delivering our projects. It can save us time, money, and effort and make us more effective in our organization so the effort is well spent. And you can take incremental approaches. It doesn't have to be daunting, much like project management itself. If you break it down into its component parts and do incremental steps as we go on through, it's very achievable over time, and we can see material improvements within our organization. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at info@epmlive.com or sales@epmlive.com, and we're happy to get you any other additional information you might need, or even give you a walkthrough of our tool sets and how they might be able to apply to your level of project management maturity. With that, thank you for joining, and hope you all have a great day.